Thank you for joining the National Afterschool Association's Google Hangout on critical issues, which has been generously funded by the Robert Bound Foundation. My name is Sarah Hill, and I'm the host. The topic for this Google Hangout is the use of heritage or first language in out-of-school time instruction. We have selected a range of panelists who will discuss some of the key issues in this area from the point of view of a state government official, practitioners, and a researcher. Each panelist will respond to one question for 3 to 5 minutes, and then there will be the opportunity for the panelists to engage with each other in dialogue. This Google Hangout will be recorded and uploaded onto the National Afterschool Association website, as well as the Youth Today Out of School Time Hub, along with some accompanying materials and resources. First, why is this topic important? The number of English language learners, ELs, enrolled in United States public schools increased by 51% in the last decade. ELs now make up 11% of the U.S. school population, and the number will keep increasing. There is a disparity in academic achievement between ELs and non-ELs. English language learners score lower on tests, get poorer grades, and take fewer advanced or college prep classes at the secondary level, and graduate from high school at much lower rates than do native speakers of English. Out-of-school time programs can play an important role in helping to close the EL achievement gap and meet the social and emotional needs of these students. However, there's little information about how to best support ELs in the out-of-school time context, and the role, if any, of first language or heritage language, and how that plays in that support. This Google Hangout will explore the importance of first language use in the out-of-school time context, the challenges and controversies of using first or heritage language, and how staff may need training to understand how to best work to support and work with English language students. Our first panelist is Cynthia Wise-Galvin, who is the District Director for the Mercedes Independent School District's 21st Century Community Learning Center after-school program in Mercedes, Texas. She received her doctorate at the University of Texas, Brownsville, and her research was on the topic, At-Risk Hispanic Students' Perception of After-School Programs, a new model targeting the needs of English language learners. Cynthia will be responding to the question, what does research tell us about best practices in the use of L1 or heritage language in the out-of-school time setting, and how to best support English language learners? And with that being said, I'm going to be turning it over to Cynthia.
Thank you, Sarah. And hello, panelists. Well, there's two parts to the question. And the first part is, of course, what does research tell us about after-school programs, and how does that part of the school day influence in English language learners? Well, first of all, we do have extensive research on how effective OST programs are in regards to children's attitude towards schools, academic performance, and just a sense of belonging. So we know that that is critical, especially for our at-risk population. So that being said, we know that ELs are in that particular area of their academics. They're struggling in school. And there's many reasons why that is occurring, but we found through research that one of the main reasons is that they're in a new environment. It's a cultural shock to new norms, new ways that they're a bit insecure about. And so there are so many different obstacles that they have to overcome. There's classroom rules and classroom expectations, academic expectations that do hinder them from being part of their new environment. So what I did is I researched both topics, and as a former director of an after-school program for 10 years, actually incorporated some new approaches. And one was, well, several, but one in particular was that we wanted to create an environment where they felt safe. knowing that they were struggling, know that many of these children do live in poverty, neighborhoods riddled with gangs, very little supervision, and so we wanted to create an area, an arena, or an environment where they were safe. There was a safe haven, because they need to feel that staying after school is cool and it's good for them, and it's important that they develop relationships. So that was one in particular that we had to deal with, not only with the students but with the teachers. Are these teachers able and qualified to understand their home environment and to provide a safe haven? The other is that we wanted to provide enriching experiences to improve their social skills. Socialization is critical for recent immigrants, or even those that have been in this country, but still live in an environment where it may be different for them at home, and then a different environment at school. So to improve those socializations. And then now we know that OST is really now focused on academic achievement, and how could we help them improve their academics and be successful learners? Well, we found very simply is attitude towards school. Their attitude towards school, where they felt, I like school. I like coming back every day because I got something to do after school, because I'm part of something. I'm part of belonging to something. So that and many more, but in particular, those approaches what we incorporated in our after-school programs and found great results. We found that over 80% of the students that stayed after school improved in their standardized tests. And in Texas, that's really important, unfortunately, but that is our focus, and that's an accountability system that we're having to deal with. So we found a way to help these students.
Thank you.
Is there anything else? No, that was it.
Okay, great. All right, we'll get back to you. I'm sure people have questions for you as well. We'll have a chance to do that. So our next panelist is Tavi Pop. She's the Education Programs Consultant with the California Department of Education. Tavi started speaking English at the age of 25. She earned a master's degree in quantitative psychology and had a 20-year career in assessment before coming to the after-school division at the California Department of Education. She developed the California English Language Development Test for 6 years. Currently, Tavi oversees expanded learning programs in 13 Northern California counties. She is also a reviewer for the Journal of Expanded Learning Opportunities. Tavi will be responding to the question, what are state policies and what is their relationship to out-of-school time programs who work with a large number of EL students or school districts who have been mandated to screen and to provide bilingual or English language services for students. So I'll turn it over to Tavi now. So you'll have to unmute your microphone. You're trying to? Okay. All right, you know what? I think
Here I go.
Good. Okay, great.
So thank you so much for having me. This is an incredibly important topic for California, as we have about over 1.4 million students classified as English learners, and that's about 23% of our student population. I'm hoping a lot of after-school practitioners will be watching this video, and because of that, I want to explain a little bit. It's very important for them to understand the classification process. When a student comes to a California school, they receive a home language survey that the parent fills out. If there's a language that's entered that's other than English, the student takes the Californian English Learner Development Test. And if the student, I'm not going to go into the scoring, the cut scores, but if the student passes the test, they are classified as English fluent. If not, they're an English learner. The communication between the instructional day and the after-school program is essential for the after-school practitioners to understand this reclassification process. Our hope is that the students will be English learners for a maximum of about 5 years. And with the help of the after-school program, there's a lot that can be done to speed up this process, because a lot of times the students stay as long-term English learners, and they'll come in as English learners sometimes in first, second grade, and they go into high school still classified as English learners. As far as the code goes, the only requirement that California has for languages, for students who have a primary language other than English, is if the school has a population of over 15% with a language other than English, where the parent another language is spoken at home, then the after-school program is obligated to provide all communications to the families in that primary language. California, the taxpayers, we put $550 million into the after-school education and safety program. So there's 2 different funds that support after-school programs in California, and there's about 4,500 of them. Both the ACES grants and the 21st Century grants requires that the grantees attempt to partner with other categorical programs. Based on all my experience, the only other categorical programs that I have seen programs partnering with is Title I for families of low income and the migrant programs. What I really would like to see is for programs to partner with Title III, which is geared towards English learners. Just like Cynthia mentioned, for first-timers in the country, there is a huge cultural shock, and after school can play a huge role into getting these kids adapted to a new culture. There is a huge opportunity as well for their own primary culture to be honored in the after-school program, which is essential for them. There's a huge opportunity for language production, for development of academic language, and to help the students to develop socially.
Great. Okay. So our next panelist is Helen Junk Malone. She's with the Institute for Educational Leadership in Washington, D.C. An English language learner herself. Actually, I think I might be the minority here. I don't know, Wendy, if you're a second language learner, but looks like it's good that we have so many. So anyway, Helen's areas of expertise include education policy and leadership, expanded learning, and systems level change in the national and global context. She's the chair of the American Educational Research Association's Out of School Time Special Interest Group and serves on the board of the Journal of Expanded Learning Opportunities. Helen will be responding to the question, based on your personal experience, what best supported your English language acquisition in the out-of-school time setting?
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for having me on this panel. I'm very honored to be part of this conversation, especially because I don't often have a chance to talk about my own personal experience, so more so it's an honor to do so. I came to the United States when I was 13 years old from a war-torn country, and I came here without any English acquisition. And for me, learning English was it was a necessity, obviously, but apart from the culture shock, that the sort of notion that was brought up earlier around sense of belonging is very important, because you want to belong in a classroom in terms of your ability to academically excel, but you also want to belong in terms of building peer relationships and be part of the school culture. For me, I was fortunate enough that I had a social studies teacher named John Scripture, who used to teach government and religion courses, and he sort of nudged me into after-school world, which I was not really familiar coming from a different educational system. So he has introduced me originally to come and just paint homecoming banners, because that's something that did not require English. It just required you to paint. then that led to come decorate for homecoming, which again did not really require much of the English. But over the course of time, I started to get more and more involved with the student government and start to get involved with what the county and the state had offered in terms of after-school programs for youth who are interested in education policy. And it was actually when I was 15 years old, through that medium, that I was able to kind of uncover that my interest in education policy and kind of set on my path of what I wanted to do for the rest of my life professionally. And that really originated from the after school space. That's not to say that ESOL class was not, or ELL class was not essential in terms of helping in terms of language acquisition, but it was really the out of school time activities that provided a sanctuary to start to build those peer relationships, to start to feel that sense of belonging, to start to also learn about the culture, the system, for me in particular, the education system, and to have access to internship opportunities and after school opportunities that kind of kept building and offer me a broader and wider range of interests that both supported and aligned with the academic goals of my school, but really provided me actually a whole new world that I was not aware of and that I would not have had access to had I just stuck with my general course acquisition, because after school provided me to be engaged in student government, to testify in front of Maryland State Legislature, to organize mock elections, to do all kinds of things, to volunteer in the summer, to build a German curriculum with teachers. None of those things would have been possible if it wasn't for these opportunities that exist in out of school time, which is why I became very passionate about that. And I just want to mention that I wrote an article about my experience in Education Week called Dictionary Girl, and I sort of outlined some of the, from the perspective both as an out of school time researcher, but also as sort of from my own personal experience, some considerations that practitioners ought to think about in terms of how to accommodate and support English language learners in their schools. So I'm happy to talk more about that later on.
Great. Okay. Can you hear me? Am I unmuted? All right, great. So last but not least is Wendy Pena. Wendy serves as the Education Program Director at Fresh Youth Initiatives, where she oversees the Welcome Program, which helps EL students adapt to life in New York City, improve their English speaking skills, and feel more comfortable speaking English. She currently participates in the National After School Matters Practitioner Fellowship, where she has elected to explore how to foster EL success in out-of-school time programs. Wendy holds a bachelor's degree in international affairs from George Washington University, and Wendy will be responding to the question, what types of professional development or training do you think would best support practitioners to support first language use or better EL instruction during the out-of-school time?
Hi, thank you, Sarah, and thank you for all of you guys. It's great conversation that we're having, and just a little bit about my organization, FY, what we do. Like Sarah mentioned, we have run the Welcome Program. We have been in existence for 5 years through the program, and what we have seen, this is an issue that is very relevant to our organization. According to the Citizens Committee for Children in New York, Washington Heights is ranked first in terms of new immigrants and English language learners. And we're definitely seeing that in our after-school program here. Something that has worked for us as an organization is having young staff who either have experienced immigration themselves or are first generation. So when our new participants come to our program, they see someone that resembles them, looks like them, or has some of the similar upbringing and traditional values from something maybe their parents went through. Because of that, their comfort level, like Cynthia mentioned, when our participants come, they're in a culture shock. Some go through the phase where they're mute, so they don't speak for a couple months, and so they really transition into that culture shock and the effects of it. So it helps to have someone that maybe not went through the same experience, but has a similar background and upbringing. What we're looking in terms of professional development for these staff members is brain development, language acquisition, those type of support in terms of that we maybe not offer, but maybe have organizations that can work on language development and the relationship between your home language and a second language development. I think those are very key issues in professional development and working with EL. I think also working on their social emotional needs. We have a variety of social emotional needs. We have kids like what that are mute, kids that have trouble expressing themselves. Have one person in particular who was in such of a culture shock that would cry every day before going to school. With everything transitions to a new town, school, new environment. Most of our participants, they may be parents or family members left in their home country, going through that withdrawal of those type of sorts. And also, if not having staff members with similar backgrounds, there's an interest in the participants' cultural identities, making sure that we don't assimilate our participants to one culture, but that we encompass the whole child as a whole, and celebrate their culture, celebrate their home language, while also at the same time helping them in this new language acquisition for their new language here.
Fabulous. Okay. So these are wonderful points of view, different points of view, all very rich, and there's a great deal of information that's being shared. Does anyone have a question for any of the panelists? Just raise your finger and okay, so Cynthia first and then Tavi.
Okay, a question for Wendy. Wendy, so as you are working with these children and understanding and knowing that it was difficult for them to assimilate to this new culture, and you said that it's not necessarily that they have to be from similar backgrounds. These educators don't have to be from similar backgrounds. It's just understanding that they are having difficulty. So what have you found works in regards to getting these children to be more comfortable being at school and socializing and developing their language skills? What have you found that really works?
What has worked in particular for our organization, we are very community-focused family environment. So for our participants, even though that family feel, and that goes from expressing themselves in terms of, we use a lot of art and hands-on activities to make sure they're comfortable, maybe bring in some of the experiences to the point where they start getting comfortable in the environment and comfortable with the staff. So we do a lot of transitions in terms of activities and games, a lot of things that's already maybe from staff members who have family members that are from that home country, or just do research about activities that are done in the home country, so the child can feel more comfortable and can easily transition. And with that, we do learning games that would incorporate English language learning.
Okay, so I just want to say that because of some of the technical glitches, That's the technology. We'll be posting a lot of these as a tip sheet and a list of resources, along with the link to this dialogue. So for the audience out there, if you missed any of this because of the technology, on our end or your end, we'll have some materials for you to take with you. So let's move on to Tavi, who had a question or a comment.
This is a question for all the panelists, actually. I was wondering, what is generally the background, the professional and educational background of the staff working directly with the students in after school?
Let's have maybe Cynthia respond to that.
Okay, well, first of all, other than the research does support the fact that we have to have qualified staff to have an effective after-school program. And in our program at Mercedes ISD, all staff was certified, all teachers were certified. We had paraprofessionals that also were certified. So we ensured that we had qualified staff. And it made a big difference because they have the techniques and approaches, and they understand how children learn. And so we ensured that all the staff that we recruited were qualified.
Wendy, do you want to respond? I'd like to respond because I'm working in an after-school program with an increasing number of new immigrant children. And while we have group specialists, and we are a registered child registered with New York State and the Department of Health, the group leaders who spend the most amount of time with the children aren't necessarily trained in EL instruction. Some of them have their GED, some of them are working on their BAs. Our specialists might be, have their masters in healthy living. But I'm finding as the educational specialist that I'm going to have to provide specialized training in second language acquisition, in games, in ways to work with students on their writing. That this is a population, a specialized population that we need extra training in and professional development. And so a lot of our resources in the near future are going to be directed in that area. And I don't know, Wendy, that our after school group leaders are not necessarily certified teachers. We're not a 21st century program. That has both the benefits. It has benefits and it also has negatives. When you work with community folks, they understand the community extremely well. They bring a lot of other benefits, but they may not have the educational backgrounds. And I know that's kind of a hot topic right now. So I'm wondering, Wendy, do you want to respond to that as well?
Yes, our situation is very similar to Sarah's. A lot of time, our group leaders are either college students themselves or recent graduates. I think that's the standard in most of New York of group leaders in after school. So we do run into that issue. We do have our group leaders who may have been English language learners themselves, so that's where we see them as an asset, and we try to, for our welcome program, recruit those type of group leaders, students that may have been English language learners themselves or are first generation, so they have that similar background. But in terms of what to do in terms of activities or the professional development, that's something that I have seen at our organization that we really have to focus on, and that's why I'm interested in putting that in my practitioner fellowship of what can we offer our staff members in terms of professional development, specifically with working with English language learners.
So I think we have time for one more question. I was kind of fascinated with Tavi's kind of interest in connecting, and correct me if I'm wrong, the 21st century with the connecting that legislation, so that as well as having to connect with Title I, that after-school programs who will get the funding have to also connect with Title III. And I'm wondering if you could talk about that as a potential legislation, written into the legislation, and kind of a little bit more about that.
This really is completely tied to the partnerships and collaboration that we like to encourage between the daytime, the instructional day, and the after-school program. It's not really an audit, but I go out with the federal program monitoring to look at how our grants are being administered, and that is one of the requirements for both ACES and 21st century. And unfortunately, it's those partnerships between the different categorical programs are not nearly as strong as we would like to see. There's huge opportunities for cost sharing, for partnering with learning from each other. The most common partnership I see is for when the school in California, with our agriculture industry, a lot of the schools have a large percentage of students that fall into the migrant category. So the migrant, has an after-school program, and so a lot of times there are resources shared between those two. But in talking with other consultants at the Department of Education who work with Title III, they have not even heard of a partnership with the after-school program, and they have a very lengthy instrument for the federal program monitoring. And I thought, why not have that there? To be in the law that's a partnership that is required. But it really comes down to educating the administrators at the school, because a lot of them do not see the potential of how after school can help support learning in the classroom. All the statistics are there, very weak for language production during the day, where the students talk between 90 seconds and 3 minutes, right? And after school, the kids are just babbling like crazy. And they feel comfortable, they feel supportive, they develop relationships. So if those activities are backed up by the law, that it would make a huge impact on how programs operate.
Well, I think, okay, so we have two people. I want to wrap this up pretty soon. So let's, I think we unfortunately may have lost Wendy. So we'll hear from Helen, and then Cynthia will be our last comment before we close this wonderful Google Hangout.
Thank you. I just want to build on what Tava was saying. Oftentimes when you think about supporting English language learners, we tend to think about what do we need to provide in terms of the instructional day to really support them. And obviously it takes a variety of roles, like pairing with another language partner if a student's fortunate to have another person who's also of the same background, or trying to acquire through sort of the same home language. But what we also don't think about, and this goes back to policy and educating policymakers on federal, state, and local level, is the after school really is that gateway to your academics, to the school day, because of what has just been mentioned. You build those partnerships, you're more relaxed, it's an environment where you can build trust, you can be peer relationships, you can have mentoring with trusted adults, and all that allows you to multiple things. Doesn't only allow for the student to grow in terms of their own social, emotional, and extracurricular interests, but also it allows the paraprofessionals or other adults in the after-school space to be able to figure out and gauge what is the comfort zone in terms of academic levels, in terms of actual English acquisition, what are some areas that need work or assistance. It really can become in the area of support, of monitoring, but it has to be done really in concert with schools. And so a big part of sort of the next step, especially as we have a growing ELL population. I mean, when I was in high school, I was in suburban Maryland, and there were only 24 of us in our ELL program, and I did not have an English partner. Nobody spoke my home language. But That's always a missed opportunity. And the part is also educating the school, the teachers, the administrators, and other community partners about how important after school can be to really get us to the level where we need to take our ELL students in terms of their own academic success. And it's a wonderful opportunity we really need to capitalize on. And the only way to do that is really to communication, information sharing, and making sure there is a dialogue and partnership that's really deeply embedded in the community, where there's understanding not just of community students, but also understanding of how programs themselves can really serve as a key core ally in supporting students.
Okay, and so our last but not least comment is Cynthia, and that'll take us to the end of our Google Hangout.
Okay, well, I just want to give you my interpretation of what Davi is saying. I do absolutely agree with her that it has to be a collaboration between the schools, the grants. We in particular, in Texas, we have a Title I grants, which are the bilingual grants, and we have parenting and parental involvement. We have to include all of these different resources that we have available to us, and everybody be in the same page and understand that these programs are intended to help children become successful learners, and so we do have funds for the bilingual students. We have funds to develop a parental involvement. We have funds for our migrant population, and then we have our 21st century funds. In addition to that, anything that the state can provide, I think certainly would provide, I think, resources that we need to continue our after-school programs. We've lost several of our grants, national grants in Texas and in South Texas in particular. We had 19 after-school programs funded by the state, which are really 21st century programs, but administered by the state, to 4 in the Rio Grande Valley. And in the Rio Grande Valley, 98% of the population are Hispanics, and over 30–40% are recent immigrants. So that collaborative effort has to be there, and it should be a united front. And I think supporting that across the board, and in continuing to communicate with our legislators is important, because they do need some information to be informed and to pass laws that will support continuation of these programs.
Okay. Okay. So I want to thank you all so much for participating. This was a wonderful dialogue, and I really enjoyed hearing your ideas, and I'll be putting together a tip sheet with some resources. If you could send me anything you have that you think would be helpful and useful, I'll be including Helen's wonderful article that was put in the Congressional Library. So thank you all, and have a great day, and we'll speak to you again. Take care.